All right. Well, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for being here this afternoon. Good morning. Still the morning, isn't it?
Yes.
Okay. Third day. It's all a blur. Thank you for being here. It's a very special session coming up. My name is Jim Kaiser, and this is one of the several recording and production track events that are taking place during this convention. I encourage you to kind of look for those as you're looking through the listing of sessions, as well as obviously looking for the very special events with people like this that you see in front of you today. So I'm going to make this brief. This is an introduction to the session. This is going to be a session with Al Schmitt and Kat Edmonson called the Engineer-Artist Strategy, and it will be hosted and moderated by Mr. Bonzai. So let's welcome our guest, and I'll turn it over to Mr. Bonzai.
Okay, you two move over one seat. Slight adjustment
Okay.
before the bus leaves. And Lisa Roy is going to take a photo of us here on stage. All right, everybody, I'm glad you're here today. This is quite a treat. We've got Mr. Al Schmitt over there. You've probably heard of that cat. And then we've got Kat Edmonson. I hope you've heard of her, but I'm sure you will if you haven't. Kat Edmonson performed in Woody Allen's movie last year, Café Society, where she is highlighted on the soundtrack, performing her version of Mountain Greenery, which is an old chestnut, they call it, a song from the past. Her most recent record, The Big Picture, is fabulous, and as all her work is. And that debuted at #1 on the Billboard Heatseekers Chart, and on #1 on Contemporary Jazz Chart, and #2 on the Total Jazz Chart. When I saw the Woody Allen movie and heard Kat's rendition of Mountain Greenery, I don't have a great knowledge of the Great American Songbook, but I have a friend who's been in theater and musical theater for 50 years. He knows everything about Rodgers and Hart and all of those guys. And I told him about Kat, and his response was, I dug this movie. Woody's recreation of the milieu, 30s Hollywood, was extraordinary. But I'd be curious to know if Kat was instructed to sing this variant of the melody and not the melody itself, something I would never come up with. Is there a method to the madness? And here's what Kat said. No, Woody doesn't seem to instruct, and he's a jazz musician, so I felt very comfortable improvising the melody. I would have felt self-conscious if I hadn't. So that's just a little introduction to Kat. And keep your eyes and ears open and Google her videos and stuff, and you'll be amazed at how much power there is in this little bundle of joy. And she's got an incredible voice, and her voice has been captured by the one and only Al Schmitt. Al Schmitt has been in recording studios since he was 7 years old, starting in his uncle's recording studio here in New York City. Schmitt is a co-founder of the METAlliance, and there's an event this weekend with the METAlliance. He's won over 20 Grammy Awards for his work with Henry Mancini, Steely Dan, George Benson, Toto, and now I'm going to mention some of the women that he's worked with. Natalie Cole, Linda Ronstadt, Shirley Bassey, Diana Krall, Dionne Warwick, Diana Ross, Nancy Wilson, Dolly Parton, and Monica Mancini, who's become a friend of mine as well, Quincy Jones, and many others. Al said when I asked him about letting people know about this event that he says, I've worked with Kat on a few of her recordings. She's an amazing singer and songwriter and a lot of fun in the studio, a total professional. He mixed her first album, is that right? Okay. So now you know who's up here. I'm going to take a seat, and we're going to talk to them about how they got here and where they're going tomorrow. I'm very happy to see some of the illustrious members of the METAlliance here today. Mr. Ed Cherney. There's Ed over there. Elliot Shiner. And Chuck Ainley. I almost said Ainsley Dunbar. No, he's not here. Anyway, let's get this show on the road.
Got Elliot.
Get it? Elliot.
Elliot China. Right.
All right, and now we have Ed Cherney too here today. I'd like to start with this is the first time I've met Kat in person, but we've been talking on the phone, and we just started telling each other about our lives. And I was curious where she got started. She got started in Texas, in Houston, and worked as a musician and with various groups there. So I asked her, how do you write a song? Do you, use a guitar? Do you use a piano? You tell them how you write a song.
I don't remember what I told you.
You told me you
My
did it.
answer might change.
You did it in your head.
I do. I write everything in my head, and I have since I was a little girl. In fact, my process began before I was even aware that that's what I was doing, because you naturally do things as a child that you're not aware of. You just do them, which I would say is the advantage of being a child. You don't anticipate what an undertaking might be of something that you're doing. You don't plot it out. You just begin, which is something I'm always trying to hang on to as I get older. But as a young girl, probably at around the age of 6 or 7, I was just hearing things in my head and singing them. And the first song that I remember writing in its entirety, I was in 4th grade on a school bus on a field trip.
Words or music first?
I write them together, in fact. I hear them. I usually hear the melody and the chorus. The thing that's most prominent to me is usually a chorus, and then also maybe some arranging, like some ornamental ideas, hooks. And I simultaneously hear 1 or 2 words that usually indicates what the focal point will be around the lyric. Still, at this point in the process, I don't know what I'm writing about. I just have a feeling and some words. So it's a great mystery to me. And it's very much like feeling around in the dark. I just keep grabbing at things, and my intuition tells me, yes, this is right, or no, this is not right. And then at some point, I've got a song. It sounds like a magical fairy tale, doesn't it?
It does, indeed. So the next step is planning a recording session. Al, when you first met Kat, did you, conceptualize beforehand what you wanted to achieve? How did it work? What happened?
We didn't have any idea. Can you hear me? Is this any idea about what we were going to do? We had it was a METAlliance thing that we were doing at Avatar.
The METAlliance is the Music Engineering and Technology Alliance, and they have workshops at top recording studios with the guys,
Right.
the best guys in the business.
So we took over Avatar, and the artist that I was working on, Phil Ramone, and I, was Kat, and that was the first time I'd met Kat. And we talked about a little bit about the instrumentation that we set up was a rhythm section and a band that she had been playing with quite a bit. So everybody was familiar with her and everything. And we set up a nice mic for her, and she opened her mouth and started to sing. And Phil and I both looked at one another because it was beautiful but different. And and it was just, lights went off, you know, and we thought, wow, this is going to be cool. And we did. We spent 2 days, and how many songs did we record?
We recorded 12 songs.
12 songs in 2 days.
Like the old days.
So
Yeah.
when Al asked me to do it, at the time I didn't have money to make a record, but I had a material that I had been working on in a band that I was starting to form. I had just moved to New York, and this was my big shot at making the record. So I rehearsed it and arranged it over the period of 9 months, and we were ready to go.
Yeah, they were really prepared, and so obviously we got 12 songs done in 2 days, and I think Kat later on did a few fixes on things
And
or
we
whatever,
added strings.
and then we mixed it in California at Capitol. Yeah, it was really cool. That was the first thing, and that got her started, I think. Broke the ice.
Well, you're going to do it again tomorrow.
We're going to do it again tomorrow and Sunday.
So have you two talked about the material that you're going to work on tomorrow?
Well, we talked about instrumentation and what she's going to do. We hadn't gone over any of the songs, but, you know, we'll leave that up to Kat or what she wants to do. You know, we're not going to dictate to her what we want her to sing. She's going to do what she does, and that's it.
Will you have your band with you?
Oh, yeah.
Can you tell us just a little bit about the instrumentation, who's playing, and what they're going to do? Are you going to be singing live with the band, or?
I prefer to sing live because it's just very different to try and overdub vocals. It's not as exciting. I got my start singing on a bandstand with different jazz musicians, and so I react to what's happening in the music, and you would think that you could do that as you're overdubbing as well, because the music is there. What's the difference? It's being played in your ear. Why can't you just? But there is something. It's palpable, whether or not it's happening in the moment. Maybe it's just the awareness of it, but I like to be there with the guys.
Yeah, if you can do it, that's got to be the best way.
Yeah, this is not a normal artist-producer-engineer relationship in the sense that normally before we go in and start an album, we'd have rehearsals, we'd go over songs, we'd go over all that. So we didn't have any time to do any of that, so it's all going to be fresh to everyone tomorrow, including the instrumentations and all. Kat and I have talked about that on the phone, and she's got some really interesting ideas, and I think it'll be great for anybody that's there to want to see how some of these instruments are being recorded, because some of them are very exotic.
We have West African harp, kora. We'll have
West African harp chorus.
kora.
Can you tell us more about that?
Oh, it's the sound of joy, but it's a hollow, round bottom, almost like a drum, and a big wooden staff coming up from it, and lots of strings, hand wound, and it's the most brilliant sound. I first heard it on a New York subway platform, and I took note of it then and wanted to record something with it then. But it was only now, I think 7 years later, that I figured out how to employ it. We also have 2 Chinese string instruments, pipa and aru. A pipa is like a guitar, pretty much, but it's played upright. And an aru is a 2-string violin, more or less. Steel pan, a jazz steel pan player, if you can believe it. And harp, trombone, trumpet, a pianist and organist.
Steel drums or something you were talking about? Steel drums?
Yeah. It's outside the box.
Yeah. So I'm relying on my dear friend, Ed Cherney, who's been around forever and he knows how to record all these instruments. So
What was that? Who's?
anyway, we're going to do this together, Ed Cherney and I, and
Ah.
we're going to be a team, and hopefully we don't step on one another and get this done. He's taking Phil's place, Phil Ramone's place, which is pretty hard to do, but he can do it.
Well, let's build up to, I want to talk about how you get her voice, because if you listen carefully to her records, she can get very intimate and kind of guttural with her voice, and then she's got a big dynamic range. One time when I was talking to her, I don't know where I got this idea, but I said, "You sound like Lady Satchmo," which you wouldn't think would come from a diminutive lady, but she's got. Well, we'll get to that. But how are you going to record some of these the instruments that she just talked about? The one sounds like a gut bucket or something.
Well, we're going to figure it out when we see the instrument, where to put the mic. And if we're not sure, maybe we ask the musician, where's the best place to put the mic?
Yeah.
And then he'll say, well, last time they did it over here and it sounded good. And we can start there and then move it around till Eddie and I are happy with it. And that's it.
But to be clear, this process that Al is talking about happens so quickly. As a musician, experiencing what it's like to be in the studio with Al and with Ed, the mics go up so fast. It's not like a typical session that you go into where you're getting sounds for an hour or something. It's like riding first class.
I remember I asked Phil in one of my interviews with him, kind of as a joke, just because I wanted to see what he'd say, how do you record a tuba? And of course he said, very carefully. But then he got into it, about the bell and, the placement and getting the room. Now you're going to be recording at a historic studio, most recently Avatar, but originally Power Station, where hundreds of platinum records have been done. And you're familiar with that room.
I've been there hundreds of times recording.
Yeah, maybe just talk a little bit about how that acoustic environment lends itself to the work you're going to do with Kat.
Wow. Well, Studio A is really great studios, a lot of wood, a couple of nice booths, large booths in the back of the room, and there's a little vocal booth on the side.
35-foot.
Pretty high ceiling, dome ceiling. You can get online and get a picture of it. It's Studio A at Avatar, now the Power Station. That's it. I've done dozens and dozens of records there. It's one of the finest studios in the world. A lot of the great Diana Krall records were done there. Dr. John.
Wow.
We've all recorded a lot of things there. It's the number one go-to studio, I believe, in New York City.
Al's pretty busy, but I don't get in touch with him we don't go bowling or anything, but I called him like 2 weeks. Just got to tell you this, because who else could say this? I said, well, Al, by the way, what have you been working on lately? What's happening? And Al goes, well, Bob's coming by on Friday. How many people can say Bob's coming by on Friday? I'd love to be able to say that.
Bob Schwartz.
All right, well, let's talk a little bit about capturing Kat's voice. Do you want to talk specific microphones?
Well, the first thing we do is we use a mic.
Yes.
That's number one.
Right.
My instinct initially with Kat and her voice would be to use a Neumann U47. That's a beautiful microphone. Go into it, a compressor. If I had a Fairchild, I would use the Fairchild. The preamps on the board are Neves, and they're just great. But Kat was in the studio a couple of weeks ago and with a friend of mine recording, and he tried a vocal mic on her, and she called me. She said, "I love the way this sounded. It brought out something in my voice that I hadn't heard before," and it was an AKG C24, which is a stereo microphone. And I'm sure he only used one side of it, and it would be like using a C12. So we're going to have that, and we'll have, Ed and I talked about this, we'll have a couple mics in there. What's that?
They're fighting over the mic now. Good, all right. Duke it out.
Well, and I quit. That's right. You can use one side, I'll use the other.
50-50.
Anyway, so we talked about a little bit about having a couple mics in there to see just which works best. A big part of this is recording Kat, obviously, but a big part is showing all the people who are going to be there, a lot of students and engineers who are coming to see how we do things. And so a big part of it is kind of making sure we have the time to show them exactly what we're doing and why we're doing it. So that's pretty much it.
Okay. Well, I guess we'll wrap it up early. No.
Is that it? Okay, thank you for coming.
You know, I've tried to cover as best I can already what's going to be happening, what has happened. Is there anything, Kat, that you want to add to how you prepare for working in the studio? Do you get nervous before you get into the studio?
Yeah. Yeah. I get nervous about, because lately I've been producing my own sessions, so I get nervous because I don't consider myself a producer, although I have lots of ideas. So I worry that I'm not thinking of everything and anticipating everything that I'll want for myself the day that I get there. I mean, the most important thing is that I'm conveying what it is that I've imagined and that I sound good. Well, Al's gonna make me sound good. Ed's gonna make me sound good. But my performance has to go well. And in order for that to happen, I need to be set up properly. But now I'm in the position of setting myself up. So the only person standing in the way of greatness, between me and greatness, is me. And now, so I get nervous. But we'll see what happens.
Yeah. Well,
One of the things that an engineer does with a vocalist is make the vocalist as comfortable as possible and not to have to worry about thinking about things, make sure that she's got a good mix in her earphones, and just, so that she has everything there, water, whatever. She doesn't have to do anything but think about singing. And if she's comfortable and that brings out the best in performances. And that's what we'll do. The fact that Kat and I have worked together before makes it a lot easier because it's not like we're getting to know you kind of thing. It's we know one another and have trust in one another and I just love the way she sings and I know it's going to be great. We just have to make her comfortable and Eddie is going to take care of the earphones and it'll be great.
wow.
Are we done?
We can finish anytime we want. Why, maybe we ought to ask the audience if they have any. I mean, this is a rare occasion to be talking to Al Schmitt and this great artist who are going to start make. You got some questions?
Oh, boy.
Are you leaving?
No, they're asking questions.
Oh, we got some questions. All right.
So Al, are you?
This is Chuck, by the way.
Hi, Chuck.
Hi guys.
Chuck who? What's your last name?
So you've got this beautiful big space there in A, but are you going to isolate everybody into separate rooms, or is everybody going to be in the same same room together and just baffle things off? Or maybe you already spoke about it and I was texting somebody, but
Now, my original thought is to isolate the drums, keep them in the back booth. On the left, it's a great booth, great for drums. So we have some separation there. I believe it's upright bass. So we'll have the upright bass and guitar. No piano,
no piano.
no.
Oh, wow.
And we have a lot of leftover space. So if you need anything upstairs, let me know.
Well, I could probably
Set it
use
up.
your room as a reverb chamber or something.
What, the reverb?
So then with the drums in that other room, are you going to like mic them up heavily and try and get ambience out of this room, or is it kind of your normal standard mic?
It's I've worked there so many times. It's really a great room, and you get plenty of great drum sound out of the booth, depending on the drummer, of course. That makes a big difference. But it should work great. I don't have to put drum room mics up and all that bullshit. You know, just mic the drums and get a good sound.
Cool.
So the last time there was actually.
And you are?
I'm
This is Jim Pace. He's the executive honcho with the METAlliance
yeah.
and
Nice to
is
see
in
you.
charge of herding these great characters, these engineers and
I take out
producers.
the trash too. So the first time we worked together, which was I think it's 6 years ago now, almost. Were there any specific moments in those recordings that you remember that, or recordings that came out of that you might want to talk about?
Yeah, there was one song that we were debating on how to approach it. We had two different ways of doing it. And one version was like an early Beatles rock tune version, and we had already recorded the other version, which was just myself and piano singing it as a ballad. And Al very politely came into the studio, muted everything so that no one could hear, and said, "This doesn't sound good." And so we stopped recording that version, and that stands out very much in my mind because, do you remember that, Al?
Yeah, slightly.
Yeah, because, well, first of all, we didn't have a lot of time, so I appreciated the honesty. And second of all, we didn't have a lot of time, so I appreciated the honesty. We just moved on, and it ended up being my favorite song. It's probably my favorite song that I've ever recorded, incidentally, and I don't know that the two have anything. It's good that we got the worst version out of the way, because Left Standing was my favorite tune. If you were to ask me, what do you do, and do you have an example of your work, I would give you the one that we kept.
And what song is that again?
It's called Nobody Knows That.
Oh,
Yeah,
I
it's
know that
great.
song.
Great song.
It's in the album.
Great song.
Were there any other songs there that came out of that that are of note or you were particularly successful with?
Yes, my song Lucky, which has been my most successful song to date, and has been, it's preceded me to different countries all over the world, and it's played in movies and commercials and in lots of places.
Can you sing that one word? No?
Which word?
Lucky?
Lucky? Can I sing Lucky?
Just one, just the word.
Lucky.
Right. We feel lucky.
Thank you.
Question for you, Al. You're going to be working with this album with Ed. What do you find are effective, like, strategies for collaborating with other engineers?
I'm sorry, I wasn't sure what this.
What are things that you do when you're working with other engineers to work together effectively?
Oh, when the engineers are splitting up
Right.
Oh, you mean
The
when there are
workload.
two engineers working on a project?
Right.
Yeah, how do you collaborate?
How do you collaborate? Well, usually this doesn't happen.
Right.
And basically, it's usually one engineer. The fact that there's two of us, both Eddie and I also produce records, so we're going to work as a team. And Eddie and I have been friends since the flood. So we know one another really well. We get along great. Eddie's got an incredible sense of humor, and he keeps things light. So it'll be a collaboration, and he'll probably give in to some of the things I want to do, and I'll give in to some of the things he wants to do. But we know that we both have one thing inside, and that's to make the best damn record we can with Kat. And so that's it.
Thanks.
Did that answer it?
Yeah.
What did he say?
That's right.
Exactly. Kat's the boss.
The boss.
Yeah.
We're there to serve the artist and serve the song, and that's the long and short of it. And whatever that day, and if it means getting the hell out of the way or doing whatever it means, that's the thing. That's the only thing.
Beautiful.
Right, Kat?
That's right.
And who are you?
My name is Michael. I'm from Duquesne University in Pittsburgh, and I was wondering, as an aspiring producer engineer, just for you, Al, in your career, what's the most difficult project or project you've had the most trouble with throughout, and how did you manage that project? How did you manage yourself in that environment and make it the best thing you could have done?
Which was the album I had the most problems with, or the most difficult to do? Is that?
Yeah, just in your own personal opinion,
By far the
push
most
yourself.
difficult album I've ever done in my life was a record with Henry Mancini called Hatari. And I had 5 percussionists across the back of the room playing all the exotic African instruments, the big shakers, the dried bean things, a log bass. Shelly Manne, a great drummer, was playing kalimba. But I also had 6 bass flutes. I had 4 trombones, 4 French horns, 4 trumpets, rhythm section, tack piano, and everything was done in mono and 2-track in those days. And I had my hands full, and I was really sweating bullets. And I was younger then, and I still got a little nervous in those days. And came out great. I won a
Came out
Grammy. It was
great.
my first Grammy that I won. The year before, I did Breakfast at Tiffany with Hank, and I got nominated and didn't win. I lost to Judy Garland. But this year, I didn't think I was going to win at all, and I did. But any engineer who hears that record has got to know how difficult it was, especially doing it. There was no real mixing on it. It was mono and 2-track right there. And that was it. That was by far the most difficult.
That was for a film, Hatari, the film.
Yeah, it's from a film where they're trying to capture a rhino. It's great.
And the
John
big
Wayne.
hit, I remember
Thank
the
you.
big hit.
Baby
Yeah, the Baby
absolutely.
Elephant Walk.
And
Yeah.
that was a calliope, a real old calliope on that. And and I'll never forget the guy's name, who was the cartage guy who brought in the calliope, was Mr. Bachagaloop. And I always thought of, some of the Marx Brothers things with, had Mr. Bachagaloop. Well, he brought us a calliope. Hank was famous for that, for bringing in all these different kind of instruments. When we did Experiment in Terror for the movie, he brought this huge pipe organ in, said they set it up, and all the guy did was put his foot down on one pedal, and it was that low note that went right through everything, which caused all the tension in the song. It was amazing. Anyway, I digress.
Oh, we love it.
When we did the session last time, I ordered a cellist. I hired a cellist to come from SIR, and as soon as it got in the studio, Al said, "Oh, Hank, you had one on every session," and and that's some of my favorite music is Henry Mancini's
Yeah,
music. He's
yeah.
one of my favorites.
Beautiful, a German celeste, nothing like it.
I have a little celeste story because I own a celeste.
Well, you're going to be a German celeste for it to really sound great.
Well, I bought the celeste that was with Glen Sound. It still has the stickers on it, and it was at Paramount Stage M about 30 years ago, and they were cleaning out the studio, and they had tons of old electronics that nobody wanted, and here's this little celeste on its casters, $125.
You still have it?
Yeah. Yeah, Artie Shaw has played it. Ray Manzarek has played it. A few people come by. But it's a beautiful instrument.
It's one
You
of my
can-
favorites.
You can borrow mine anytime.
I'd love to.
Great. Yes.
So when you're under pressure, you're in the studio, it's scheduled, and Kat, you're not in the zone maybe. How do you get in the zone? Al, how do you help her get in the zone? How do you help artists in general as a producer to get centered and be ready to give that perfect performance?
I don't struggle with being in the zone when I'm in the studio with Al. He's when I mentioned first class, he's such a professional, and the level at which you're operating when he's around he just raises the bar. So my focus is strong. I've been in the studio with other people, however, and I get distracted or I get nervous or I'm not in the zone and I need help back. But I personally haven't experienced that with Al, ever.
See, we're getting applause already. Wow, cool.
Next door, they love it.
Al, how do you get people in the zone, artists in the zone, if they're not feeling it?
Wow. Well, the first thing is you usually if they're not feeling it, take a break. And, if we're at Capitol, we just kind of walk down the hall and, all these great photographs of people and all, and they kind of inspire people.
Yeah, you see.
And then we chat about what's going on and what we're doing and try to work out the little insecurities and then go back in and do it. I love recording live, and I'm really blessed because I work with a lot of people that like to record vocals live with the band. So for me, that's the most fun. I mean, it's the way I started. You couldn't punch in when I started. You couldn't overdub. The only way you could overdub later on was with two tape machines going from one to the other. So it's just my passion is to be in the studio with musicians, whether it's a small group or a symphony orchestra and a vocalist. And, I'm blessed. I go to work doing something I love every day, and I think that's one of the things that we all have in common with the METAlliance. We all love what we do so much, and I think it's one of the reasons we all are so good at it. And it's not like we specifically try to be the best we can be. We just do what we do, and it happens to be really good. Did I answer that question now?
Hey, Moogie Canazio, why don't you come up and talk to us a little bit? Because you've worked with Al. Give us your angle on the great Al Schmitt.
I don't have a question for Al or for Kat. What I do have is, after so many years that I've been stalking his work, and I still have the privilege to come in a place like this and learn something else from you. That is so rewarding to know that, not only the scope of your work is just extraordinary, but you also find time to sit there with this extraordinary artist under the moderation of Bonzai and give us even more. So I'm leaving here today with certain that I learn a little bit more. And what a privilege. Besides having your number on my speed dial, I can come here and enjoy that. Thank you so much, Al. Thank you, Kat, for
the reason
giving
I'm
us
here is
this.
I'm getting big bucks.
Yeah, well, I know that, that we all know, but,
What?
privilege. Thank you.
Thank you, Moogie. Any other questions?
Well, I'm back.
Oh, here we go.
Oh, boy.
Okay, Chuck.
I just got to know because in my mind I remember that the recording that you and Phil and Kat did together was nominated or won a Grammy. Is that correct? Or am
No,
I?
it was nominated, but
It was nominated, but still, congratulations.
Yeah, absolutely.
For sure.
I was fortunate enough to get to come in the control room and hear some of it as you were recording. And if anybody is going to be there, you're truly going to be rewarded by an exceptional performance.
thank you.
Yeah, it's going to be really a fun day, and that's the whole thing. We're all in there striving to do one thing: make a really nice record, and present Kat at her best. And that's what we're going to try to do. And Eddie and I will certainly do that. You know, I've watched Eddie work quite a bit, and it's always amazing. People love him, and he's got a great sense of humor, and it makes people laugh, and that takes away tension, and it's a great thing.
That's so important.
Hey, no, none of that. Stop that.
Let me tell one quick little story about Al. This must have been 20 years ago or more. And, you know, I'm up front enough. He's working with the chairman of the board, with Phil Ramone at Capitol. And I say, oh, can I come in? And Al says, even the wives can't come in, but I'll see what I can do. So Frank Sinatra wasn't there yet. So I got to watch these guys setting up. I mean, they were ready to go. It was a big orchestra, you know, and Frank had to have, had to have a handheld mic and a glass of scotch.
No.
No?
No, Phil built a little booth. That's before Capitol had isolation booths. And Phil had a little booth built with air conditioning in it. We had a bottle of Jack Daniels and a carton of Camel cigarettes and a bunch of Tootsie Rolls. Frank likes Tootsie Rolls. So we had the band set up. We had the strings and B with the doors open and the big band set up and everything. And Pat Williams was the arranger conductor. And so Frank, standing right next to me, said, where do you want me? And I said, well, in the booth. And he looked at the booth and he looked at me. He said, I'm not going in there. I said, okay, where do you want to be? He said, how about right here? Right in front of the brass section. And I said, fine. And he said, I want a handheld mic. And I, cool, whatever you want. And I turned and looked at Phil and I figured, this is Phil's problem, not my problem. And so I would put Frank anywhere he wanted, let Phil change it. Anyway, that's that story.
Man.
And he said to me at one point, what are you doing, Frank? And I said, I'm in there making you sound good. He said, well, keep it up. And then one other little thing. We had a lot of tube mics up. And so we had extra microphones warming up and sitting against the wall. And we had a couple of runners sitting right by the mic. In case the mic went down, he could change it quickly. Because with Frank, you don't get a second chance. And one of the kids came in, and everybody called Frank Sinatra Mr. S. And the kid came in, he said, Mr. S, talk to me. I said, really? What did he say? He said, you kid, get the fuck out of my way. He was so proud of that.
All right. This has been wonderful. Thank you for joining us
That it?
at this historic occasion.
Certainly.
We got time. We got time.
So much pressure, Ed.
Yeah.
I had a question for Kat. I'm young, starting out, and I deal with many artists, most artists who I think get caught up in their own head about what they perceive to be commercial, right? Like I need to write this song so that it will sell or this or that. And there can be discrepancy because, on my part at least, because I truly admire everyone's advice in terms of engineering production where they say their job is to be masterful and allow the vision of the artist to be realized. So you said you're completely comfortable, or you have been comfortable with Al while recording, and like you're in the zone. What are things that, in terms of interaction, maybe that Al has done to maybe ease your minds, aside from being just the true top dog professional that he is? Like, are there things that you can speak of that have kind of eased your mind in that process to help you get in the zone that might be something I could use to ease the mind of the artists that I work with?
Well, to speak to your question about artists wanting to appeal commercially, of course, when an artist goes in, they want to come out of the studio with something that people want to listen to. We want to be heard. We want to be recognized. And suddenly there's this great pressure. Is this all going to be worth it or not? Or is this going to sell anything, for instance? And that's when you really start making bad decisions, when that thought comes into mind. So one thing I've learned in my personal experience is trusting your intuition, your original idea and the original feeling that you were following, because doing anything for the purpose of a trend is a mistake, unless it's inherent in you. If the sound is inherent, then don't do it, because the people that you're trying to please are going to dump you eventually anyway, and or they'll lose their job, and you're not going to please them, and then you're just lost, and all you have is yourself. So it's one of those storybook lessons, like a kindergarten lesson, but it's real, it's true, it's the most important thing. As far as what Al did, the example that I said before about him coming in very politely and just saying, this isn't working, it doesn't sound good. Al also operates seemingly from his intuition. Don't you think, Al? He trusts himself first, and I think any good engineer, producer, artist does. It's knowing your own taste, knowing what you like and what you don't like is probably the most valuable asset you have. So honesty, and I know that's a fine line to walk when an artist needs coddling and they're insecure. So I wish you many artists with strong personal opinions.
That's really good advice. Really. Anybody else?
Anybody else got a little question here?
I got a bunch of stories.
You've got great stories.
All right, tell us a Bob Dylan story.
What?
Tell us a Bob Dylan story.
A Bob Dylan story. Oh. He's another one. He decided he wanted to work in Studio B, and he liked the acoustics in the room, and he was standing in the middle of the room, and my assistant on that session was Chandler Harrod from Capitol, and he did the same thing that Frank did to me. He said to Chandler, where do you want me? And Chandler said, well, where do you want to be? And Bob said, well, here's good. And Chandler said, great. So he looked at me, and so we put the mic right there, and then we built everything around him. It was his band, and it was an acoustic guitar, upright bass, drums, electric guitar, and steel guitar. So I had everybody sitting in a semicircle around him so he could hear everybody, no earphones. So and he didn't want to see any mics. That was the other thing. So he had to see the rhythm guitar mic, and so that was one thing. But the bass mic I had down and over on the side, and I only had one mic there. And for the drums, I just used one microphone, a C24 overhead. And then for the electric guitar, I had the guitar player's amp behind him, and then the mic between him and the amp. So he couldn't see that mic, and the same thing at the steel guitar. So as we go down, running the thing down, he said he couldn't hear enough of the rhythm guitar, so we just moved the guy closer to him. And that was it. So we do 2 takes, and Bob And Ed's worked with him quite a bit too. We know we don't do a lot. He doesn't do a lot of takes. So to takes, he'd come in, he'd listen. Man, that sounds great. That's it. Okay, next tune, and that was it. And he just kept going like this. And over a period of 3 weeks one time and 5 weeks the next, we did 52 songs with Bob, all old standards, all the old American songbook songs that he said these songs should be kept alive, and he wanted to show off the great songwriters of back then and what it was like to write a good song with a meaningful lyric. It was great, but he picked one song that, there were a bunch of songs that Sinatra did back in the late 40s, early 50s, and he picked one song, and I had never heard this song, and it is in a compilation thing that Frank did, but it was a song that they wrote, Jimmy Van Heusen and Frank wrote as a fun thing, and they wanted to record it to see if the record company would actually put it out. So it's a song called There's a Flaw in My Flu. And it is the silliest damn song you've ever heard in your life. Frank Sinatra sang it. Of course, the record company didn't put it out. It didn't go out on that album. It did come out later on a compilation. So look up Sinatra and look up There's a Flaw in My Flu. Anyway, and Bob sang it seriously, and it was really funny. And it's in one of the albums. I don't know, there's 3 albums out. Shadows in the Night. The last one is Trilogy, which is 30 songs. And the second one is Dark Shadows. Anyway, I don't have any funny stories with Bob because Bob's not a funny guy. What's that? I didn't hide it. It had to be right in front of him. And what I did was I had that mic. It was a U-47, the same mic we use on Sinatra. And it just sounded great on his voice. But then behind that, about 1.5 feet, I had a 49 in Omni. And it picked up a lot of the ambience in the room. And check out the albums. They sound pretty good. And it's pretty interesting stuff from Bob. And he's now doing a lot of that in his show, a lot of those songs. People love it. Anybody else? What year was that? In the last 2-3 years. Yeah.
This is new stuff.
This is all, new. And I just finished doing something with him where we did 3 takes. It was with an orchestra, the same thing, no earphones, everybody live. Vince Mendoza did the arrangement. And at the end of the 3rd take, he said, "Oh, that's it, it's great." And so he said, go mix it, Al. And he went out to his, he's got the big bus that he goes out and lounges in. It's in the the Capitol parking lot. So I mix it, I get it set up, mix it, and his manager gets him back down. He comes, he listens, he said, "I love it, Al, I love it." He said, "What would it sound like in mono?" I said, "Sound mono." So he said, "Well, let's hear it." I said, "Okay." So he went back to the bus, and I put it up, and I set everything up in mono and made a mono mix on it. And he came back, and he listened. He said, "Yep, that's it. Print it." So that's going to come out in mono, whatever. But yeah, he loved it. It was great. And I felt good about that because, when I first started, there was only mono. There was nothing else. So, I learned how to do that pretty quickly. That was it.
Are you all aware how quickly Al mixes? Because whenever we've been in a mixing session, it's only taken 3 or 4 days for an entire record.
What's that?
Only 3 or 4 days for an entire record.
Oh,
Usually
yes,
3.
okay.
We usually end early, and we take long lunches, and Al goes home to his wife early.
Yeah, I mix fast.
Hey, Al,
Yes.
tell them how you mix Steely Dan.
How I mix Steely Dan. Elliot recorded Peg, and I got the fortune that they called me to mix it in LA, and it was at Dom and Steiner's studio called Sound Labs. And they came with the tapes, and they gave me the tapes, and then they left. So my assistant was a girl by the name of Linda Tyler, and she was fabulous. And so we were there, and I get up a mix, and I get, the stuff, had a little echo, and get everything going. It sounded pretty good. And I turned the monitor off and hit the tape machine, and just to see how the meters were going, and little did I know they had walked in the control room behind me while I was doing this. And so I turned up the monitor then, and I got this pretty good mix, which I had gotten before. And I turned it up, and they were like, they couldn't believe it. And Gary Katz came back and told Elliot, he said, "Please, Al Schmitt can mix without monitors." He said, they thought I was mixing actually with the monitors off, and all I was doing was seeing how the meters are working. Anybody else? Oh, it's time. Scram.
We did good. Yeah, we got to get out of here. The Teamsters have to have lunch, I think. If anybody's curious about what's happening this weekend, talk to that guy with the white hat standing in the back there, because it's going to be a wonderful opportunity. And thank you all for being here. Thank you to the AES. Thank you to Al Schmitt. And most of all, Kat Edmonson. Don't forget that name.
I love you.